The election that was conducted on Saturday was free and fair, and the OSEC went ahead to conduct the election, leveraging on two separate judgments, declared the offices as vacant. As I can confirm to you that as at Friday, a day before the election, there were two subsisting judgments that declared the offices vacant. So the OSEC premised on that decided to go on with the conduct of the election. And the election went on free and fair, and it was peaceful. Okay. So that is it. If I may make specific reference to the two judgments I referred to, in 2022, there was a judgment obtained by the APP as an opposition party in the state from the Federal High Court. In that judgment, the court declared the election held to the local government in 2022 as a null and void. The APC, as a matter of fact, appealed against the judgment. The appeal was dismissed in January 2025. Also, on Friday, a day before the election, and before that, PDP equally approached the High Court of Osun State about 5 days before the election. And on Friday, the court delivered a judgment which equally declared the seats vacant. And it was on that premise that the OSEC, as a respondent in the two judgments I have made reference to, decided to go on with the election. You will recall that the OSEC had given notice of the election since February 2024 in order to comply with the express provisions of the Electoral Act to the effect that any election to be conducted into local government, there must be a notice of 360 days to the electorate and all political parties. It was this notice that the election conducted in 2002 did not comply with. You will recall that in 2022, the then OSEC in Osun State and the government of former Governor Oyetola, after former Governor Oyetola lost the gubernatorial election, Governor quickly already planned and conducted election into local government. And it only gave the electorate in the state 2 months notice, 60 days notice, contract to the express provisions
of 360
of the Electoral Act and the Osun electoral law, which prescribes 360 days notice. And it was on this basis that the Federal High Court in Osogbo declared the election not void and sacked the potentially elected officials in the election. There were two separate judgments obtained against the election in 2002. The first one was obtained by the PDP. The second one was obtained by the APC. We concede that the one obtained by the PDP was struck out by the Court of Appeal on the ground that at the time the PDP approached the court and filed its originating summons, the course of action had not arisen in that because as at that time the then OSEC had not published the notice of the election. So the Court of Appeal found that the suit filed by the PDP was premature, was speculative, as it didn't wait before the then OSEC filed or published the election notice. But this legal error, or let me say technical error, did not arise in the case of APP, as APP approached court in 2022 after the then OSEC had published the election notice. And that was why the appeal filed by the APC against the judgment obtained by the PDP was dismissed by the Court of Appeal. The appeal was filed.
Thank you for that background.
So as we speak, as at the Friday, as at the day before the election conducted on Saturday, the seats were vacant. Two separate judgments declared the seats vacant as at Friday, that is the eve of the election.
So thank you for that background, Honorable Kareem. I would like to bring Dr. Misbau Lateef into this conversation. Now, Dr. Misbau Lateef, let's talk about the current situation of things. Against the advice of the Attorney General of the Federation, against the advice of the Nigerian police, the governor of Osun State, Governor Adeleke, went ahead to conduct these local government elections, which the Honorable deemed as free and fair. The results of that elections, it was a complete sweep of all 30 chairmanship seats and 322 councillorship seats in the Osun State local government elections. Where does that lead us now? The latest judgment when it comes to the myriad and the legal disputes surrounding local government elections in Osun State. Does the latest judgment that came, pronouncement rather, from the court in Ilesha on Friday, does it validate these elections that were held? And what happens to the to all the judgments in the past and suits that we have from various parties?
All right, thank you so much, and good morning once again. Let me say that one of the challenges to our democratic credibility in Nigeria is what I call contrived legal controversies, particularly when this is done, mischievously by people who have the capacity to guide the society, and then they choose to do otherwise. Now, the reason why I've said this is very clear. In the mix of all that we have seen so far regarding the Osun election, I think the judgment of Friday is the most scandalous, and I'm being very careful here in my choice of words, but for the want of better adjective, that cannot really be called a judgment, because it is a complete mockery of our judicial process. So to go straight to your question, where does this lead us?
No, I would like to know why you have deemed that election, the judgment as a mockery of our judicial processes.
All right, thank you so much. You see, I've actually described the judgment not only as a mockery of the judicial system in Osun State, I've also described it as a black market judgment, probably procured through an unethical way. And why do I say
These are very serious allegations.
Now, yeah, they are. And as a senior lawyer, I take responsibility for what I'm saying, and I understand the import of all of this. Now, that judgment was, on the face of it, was obtained through a process that is not exactly in accordance with the rules of the court. The proceeding leading to that judgment or purported judgment was filed on the 18th. It was supposed to be a judgment to resolve dispute among parties. On the one hand, you have the PDP as the only applicant. On the other hand, you have OSEC and then the chairman of OSEC. These are one and the same parties, and there is no dispute. What was that judgment was supposed to achieve? It was supposed to compel OSEC to go ahead with an election. Now, doing so was clearly, contemptuous of the existing Court of Appeal judgment, which had validated the existence of local government chairmen across Osun State. So in the hierarchy of courts, or what we call judicial precedent, no high court of any state has the judicial competence to issue an order that will amount to a contempt of a decision of the Court of Appeal in Nigeria. So basically, looking at the fact that, one, there was no dispute. So directing OSEC to go out with the election when the parties on one hand and on the other hand are one and the same. All the parties who were supposed to be part of that proceeding were never brought before the court. So the judge ought to have actually asked himself, and this is with due respect to my Lord, Honorable Justice Aderibigbe, who gave that judgment. All the parties were not before the court. The parties in the election in Osun State, on one hand. Two, the ruling was given barely 3 days after the court papers were filed. These are clear, I would say, you know, I mean, I just really want to be very careful again now, so that, and I really want to be modest in my choice of word. So basically, that judgment is what we call non sequitur in law. I mean, it is quite, I would say, ineffectual. It has no basis.
Now,
it couldn't have been relied upon to conduct an election, and whatever was built on it cannot stand. Because in law, again, we say you cannot put something on nothing and expect it to stand. So basically,
so
for
the
me,
implications of this now, Dr. Lateef.
the implication is that first, the OCEC in Osun State couldn't have validly relied on an order that is actually ineffectual, as I've put it. Two, the election that was conducted was actually a sham, as I've described it elsewhere. I mean, I saw from your clip now, the chairman of OCEC in Osun State reeling out names of people who purportedly win an election. I'm sure you have covered election before now. I mean, this is the most scandalous of such exercise I've ever seen anywhere. No figures were attached to name. It just barely read out name and nothing more. No collation, nothing, no figures. I mean, I don't want to go into other particular material of what I've already described a sham. And a sham by law, or technically speaking, actually means something that is outrightly fraudulent. So what we saw in Osun 2 days ago, one, was not really an election. There was no legal basis for it. And as we say in law, the truth speaks for itself. I'm sure the governor, His Excellency, Governor Adeleke, understands this. And that was why when yesterday he purported to swear them in, he actually directed, as I've seen from reports, that they should not go near the local government council.
We'll get to that in the course of our discussion, Dr. Lateef. But I would like to bring in the Special Advisor to the Governor on Legal Matters, Honorable Nurudeen. Kareem, while Dr. Lateef was speaking, I saw you nodding your head in disagreement, and your body language gave out the message that you were totally not in agreement with what Dr. Lateef was saying. Number one, I want you to respond to allegations of that the judgment that was given on Friday didn't go through proper judicial scrutiny. It was rushed, and it didn't meet all legal standards. And number two, the credibility of the elections that took place on Saturday. You saw the OCEC chairman read out names of winners with no figures. And there are also reports that there were no accreditation materials used during the elections. I guess that's why we have a total sweep of the PDP sweeping all local government and councillorship positions. How do you respond to that?
Well, in the first place, with due respect to my lecturer, the doctor, I think we are lawyers. The extant principle of law is that when a court of law gives a judgment, there is what we call presumption of regularity and validity in any judgment given by the court until a higher court sets that judgment aside. My learned senior, with respect, the opinion of my learned senior cannot constitute the judgment of an appeal court, setting aside the judgment of the court. A judgment of the court is meant to be obeyed until a higher court sets it aside. All the purported irregularities in the judgment, as highlighted by my learned senior, I think is an issue that when there are mechanisms in our judicial system to challenge the judgment. So I don't want to believe, as we speak, as at Saturday, that the election was held, the judgment remained binding and valid. And even up to this moment, we are exchanging those. I think only a higher court can set aside the judgment. So, and I also want to point something out. The judgment that was rendered on Friday was actually founded on the judgment obtained by the APP in 2002, which sacked the chairman, purportedly elected, and nullified the election on the ground that the then OSEC just gave 60 days notice instead of 360 notice. And APC filed an appeal against the judgment of the APP. The appeal was dismissed in January this year. So the judgment of the court, until set aside by a higher court, remains subsistent.
Now, Honorable Kareem, what about what Dr. Lateef mentioned, the issue of the other parties not even present in court, so not having representatives before this judgment was given?
No, the relief sought by the PDP, you know, we have to commend the PDP for being civil. As the tension was high, PDP decided to approach court. And the party that the PDP dragged to court was OSEC, because OSEC was like maybe very reluctant to go ahead with the conduct of the election. So the PDP, as a party that was interested in the conduct of the election, dragged the OSEC to court. The election was not meant to be conducted by any party. And of course, any party cannot be compelled to participate in the election. So the PDP sought relief to compel the OSEC to go ahead with the election, considering the resources for the past 1 year that had been committed to the preparations for the election, and considering the subsisting judgment of the APP, the appeal on which had been dismissed, and which APP judgment was actually actually nullified the election conducted in 2022, meaning that as at that Friday, both the APP judgment and the fresh judgment from the High Court of Osun State had declared the seats vacant. It was on that basis that OSEC went ahead to conduct the election. With respect to my Nene senior in the House, the presumption of validity and regularity in any judgment of the court still exists in favor.
Now, because of want of time,
can approach the court.
Now, because of time, I would like you to also respond. Honorable Kareem, I want you to respond to the allegations on the conduct of the elections is falling short of democratic standards, that there was no accreditation materials and it was a sham. How do you respond to that? What's your take?
My brother, we will not, it is not a condition for the validity and credibility of an election that all voters in the state must vote. I want you to know that one. Anybody alleging that because of some people did not vote somewhere, that means the election.
No, they're not. I mean, they're saying that the conduct of the elections fell short of democratic standards. It's not about the number of voters that turned up. The OSEC chairman was declaring results without numbers.
The APC, no. If you listen to the OSEC chairman, after declaring the winners, he said, anybody, the documents, the results, or any data that anybody might want to get are available with them.
I mean, shouldn't it be transparent? We've seen election conduct in different parts of the world. It should be part of the announcement process. It's not something that you appeal to see. It's democracy is an open and civil process. Now, but let me touch on one more thing before I move to Dr.
And Judicial chairman said, anybody who wants any document as regards the election, the result, everything, this will apply. This will apply, will be obliged with the certified true copy of any document in the election. Then I want to tell you, there is already an election petition tribunal set up for this election. If anybody is aggrieved, the channel is there, the opening is there, the window is there for them to express their grievances against the election.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nurudeen. I would like to bring Dr. Lateef into the conversation. Thank you so much, Honorable Nurudeen. Now, Dr. Lateef, with both the APC and PDP claiming legitimacy over the council positions, this was happening before Saturday's elections. Now, Saturday's elections just seem to muddle up the whole situation some more. What do you think is the likely political outcome in this Osun State local government administration? We have new elections. The newly sworn-in local government chairman have been told not to resume. What will be the way out of this conundrum so as to avoid further violence? Because we've seen that already.
Okay, thank you so much for using the word conundrum. And you will recall that at the opening, I did say that one of the challenges with our democratic process is controversies, or what you call conundrum now. Actually, these controversies, were created deliberately by politicians. So the only way out is for parties across board to go back to the due process of law. To the best of my understanding, before that election in Osun State, the seat at the local government council were non-vacant, and in fact were duly occupied by parties from the other side. And to the best of my understanding, those people on the other side, they remain, on those seats. So for as long as they have not served out their term, I think the best thing for the governor, which as he did yesterday, is to allow the due process of law to take its course. And that due process of law is to allow these people to serve out their term. And I can tell you that that is what the law says. As we speak now, the only court judgment that is valid in the mix of the whole thing is the judgment of the Court of Appeal decided on the 10th of February. Any other judgments or decision from a lower court, however obtained or whatever it is, they are of no moment, as we say in law. And I did mention that earlier. Now, let me quickly respond to what Mr. Kareem said regarding the credibility of the election. You see, there are basic requirements to assess the credibility of any election. And the Electoral Act is very clear on that. And there are also global standards to assess such credibility. Voters' accreditation is very critical. Voters' collation of results is very critical. Announcing specific numbers, of the pool is very critical. All of these were clearly missing in what we saw in Osun over the weekend. Granted that some party boycotted, but that regardless, the requirement of law ought to have been met. So, and this is why this election has been described, as a sham by myself and quite many people. And I'm happy that one of the parties in the election, APM, or who was supposed to be party, actually described the election as such. So going forward, I think it's for the governor to allow the extant chairman...
Okay, a fine place to take a break, gentlemen. We'll continue our conversation on the conduct of the Osun local government and controversies surrounding it. Do stay with us. This is Breakfast Central. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Breakfast Central, and we're still discussing the conduct of the local government elections and controversies in Osun State. And I have with me Tolulope Adeleru Balogun. Tolu, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And it's been a fascinating conversation so far, especially as we look at the political dynamics of what is happening in Osun State under a spotlight with an off-cycle local government election that has left a lot of people really wondering if there's truly democracy in a handshake.
It seems to just get messier every day.
Absolutely.
You unravel a new chapter and all of that. But we have a gentleman with us, Dr. Misbau Lateef, and also this Special Advisor to the Osun State Governor on Legal Matters, Nurudeen Kareem.
All right, I think we should pick up. One of the gentlemen was speaking right before we went for that break, and I'd like him to finalize his thoughts before we start looking at the way forward and also a directive coming from the state governor as well. I think was that Dr. Lateef?
Yes, Dr.
Okay,
Lateef.
Dr. Lateef, please go ahead and finish your thoughts before we took that break.
All right, thank you so much. I was just trying to say that there are basic criteria to assess credibility of any election, and what we saw in Osun over the weekend qualified that election as a sham or purported election because those basic, criteria, were absent. And for me, this underscore also the need for Nigerians, to rise up peacefully, I would say, by way of agitation and rescue their local government administration from the vice grip of governors. And this is not restricted to Osun State. You know, there is this desperation to dominate local government. And this is why you see across all the states, you know, one party, you know, wins all. Now, can you imagine INEC or federal government, you know, perpetuating this kind of scandals, you know, against the state? Then we can imagine how this will take our democracy. So for me, really, I think going forward, people really need to gear up peacefully by way of agitation, as I said, you know, to participate actively and demand from our politicians, you know, the need to follow the due process of law, not only in the conduct of election, but in all general government affairs. So, as Osun State Governor has done, which I think is the right thing, I think the best thing for them now is to stay away from the local government councils and allow those who are still in those offices to exhaust their time. And then Osun State can take it from there. Otherwise, I fear that the kind of challenges that we saw in the last week, unfortunate fatalities, and I hope we don't see that again, you know, might also, but I just pray that we don't get there again.
All right, thank you so much for that. Now, Mr. Kareem, let's pick up from where Dr. Lateef stopped in terms of the governor's directive that the newly sworn in chairman should stay away from the secretariat. Can you give us a sort of background into what this administration is thinking in regards to that directive and how they expect this to play out?
Thank you. You see, the whole world is supposed to give kudos to His Excellency Governor Jackson Nurudeen and Dumola Adeleke for what he displayed yesterday by directing the newly sworn-in chairman to, for now, stay away from the local government. You will recall that the purported takeover was forceful, was violent. So I won't even see it as that the APC chairman took over last week. Some of them broke the gate to the local government, they broke into the offices, they vandalized some properties of the local government secretariat. So the governor gave the directive yesterday in order to avert any further generation of the crisis, pending the time normalcy will return to the state. Some people, what the APC chairman did last week was just invasion. It was not takeover. And going forward, I want to advise the APC. It is settled in our law that a judgment of the court remains binding until a court sets it aside or until the enforcement of the execution or enforcement of same is stayed by another of the court or a higher court. The two judgments, that is the Court of Appeal judgment, dismissing the appeal filed by the APC against the judgment that the APP obtained, sacking the chairman, nullifying the election that produced it. That if the APC wants to be civil, the right thing for them to do, I think, is to get an order of court, stay the execution of the judgment. Another thing, the first judgment given by the Osun State High Court, the law has a procedure through which, when you are dissatisfied with the judgment, you can get the judgment stayed. You can get the enforcement of judgment stayed. This is what is expected of the APC instead of leveraging on what is generally referred to as federal might and federal power to forcefully take over the local government. I join my learned senior in advising, admonishing our politicians to ensure that the intendment of the provision of Section 7 of the Constitution to the effect that the administration of the local government should be carried out by democratically elected council. They should make sure this intendment comes to effect. And this was what the Osun State Governor and the OSE tried to do. You will realize that the beginning of this problem we are having today was the attempt by the former governor of Osun State, Governor Oyetola, to voice members of his party on the local councils. You will remember that after he lost the governorship election to Governor Adeleke in July 2022. I knew he had just 3 months to spend in office. It was then he already planned and decided to hold local government elections.
Okay.
He was in office for almost 4 years. He didn't think of holding the election. So all this, and that was the basis. There was no compliance with the law that prescribed a notice of 360 days whenever any governor or OSEC or any state electoral commission wants to conduct election.
All right, Mr. Kareem, I'll give you just 10 seconds to wrap that up because we do have to quickly move on. Just 10 seconds to wrap up that thought.
Yeah, what you are saying is that as the PDP is being civil, the APC should be civil. If truly they have any order restricting them and anybody disturbs them, I think they should go to that court and enforce the judgment instead of using power, using police, using federal power to force themselves on the people.
All right, Mr. Kareem, thank you so much. We'll have to leave the conversation at that for now. I know this is still, in terms of how news works, still quite a developing story, so we'll continue to pay attention to it. But a very big thank you to Dr. Misbau Alamu Lateef, Senior Lecturer at the Law School, University of Hull in the United Kingdom, as well as Mr. Nurudeen Kareem, Special Advisor to the Osun State Governor on Legal Matters. Gentlemen, Osun State, yes. I beg your pardon, Osun State Governor on Legal Matters. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.